This material explores the deep emotional landscapes of regret, accountability, and the struggle for self-forgiveness, contrasting analytical, psychological prose with deeply personal, confessional lyrics. But right away, the profound emotional dependency in the lyrical section undermines the message of autonomous self-forgiveness established in the prose.
Yeah, it really does.
I mean, we have two very distinct sections here, and synthesizing them reveals a pretty significant contrast in how the core theme of guilt is handled.
Definitely.
The prose section advocates for carrying past mistakes without resorting to self-destruction. It builds this really strong case for the necessity of constructing new, independent meaning.
Even when things can't be fully repaired.
Exact. Or when a relationship is permanently altered. We read this and we feel a sense of rigorous, self-driven psychological work.
Right. But then we cross over into the lyrical section, and suddenly that hard-won independence just seems to evaporate.
It really does vanish.
The lyrical speaker anchors their entire capacity for change on external validation, which culminates in the repetitive refrain, "and the reason is you." So my immediate reaction reading this was to wonder if this dependency might actually be an intentional depiction of an unhealthy coping mechanism.
Oh, interesting.
Right? Could the author be showing us a snapshot of the messy, dependent stage that necessarily precedes the healthy, autonomous state described in the prose?
Well, if the intention is to depict a preceding unhealthy state, the text doesn't provide the necessary narrative cues to guide the reader toward that interpretation.
Okay, yeah. Instead, the lyrics are positioned as the emotional climax. They're functioning as a supposed resolution of the speaker's journey.
Ah, I see.
And authors often fall into this specific trap because, pop culture lyricism has trained us for decades to equate the phrase, "I need you," or "I'm changing for you," with deep romantic remorse.
We really are conditioned that way.
We are. We're conditioned to view total codependency in music as the ultimate expression of an apology. But psychologically, that narrative shifts the emotional burden entirely back onto the victim.
Wow, yeah, that's a huge shift.
Right. Because the prose meticulously builds a framework of internal acceptance. It advocates for an internal locus of control, meaning the speaker believes they have agency over their own rehabilitation.
And that their actions dictate their outcomes.
Exactly.
So by saying, "I've found a reason for me to change who I used to be, and the reason is you," the speaker externalizes that locus of control entirely.
Completely externalizes it.
It places the full weight of their psychological rehabilitation squarely onto the shoulders of the injured party. It's like building a magnificent, freestanding architectural structure in the prose,
Yeah.
but then right at the end, attaching its main load-bearing pillar to the neighbor's house in the lyrics.
That's a great analogy.
If the neighbor moves, the whole structure collapses. The architectural integrity of the self-forgiveness is compromised.
And viewing it from the perspective of the injured party highlights the weakness of this approach even further.
How so?
Well, the prose explicitly states that the other side won't always forgive you, and that you must learn to navigate that reality. Yet the lyrics put this immense, suffocating pressure on the injured party to be the singular reason for the speaker's betterment.
Yeah, that's heavy.
The message goes from, "You must learn to live with your past and build new meaning for yourself," to, "My new meaning relies entirely on your existence."
That's a huge contradiction. So how do we fix it?
The suggestion here is to realign the lyrical speaker's core motivation to reflect the internal growth and self-accountability championed in the prose,
Okay.
while still acknowledging the injured party as a catalyst rather than the sole foundation.
I like that. Looking at the injured party as a catalyst rather than a foundation fundamentally shifts the power dynamic of the apology.
Exactly.
But it doesn't have to remain present to sustain the resulting change.
Right. The reaction keeps going.
The injured party can be the reason the speaker realized they needed to grow, but the speaker must be the engine driving that growth forward.
So let's look at some concrete examples of how to execute this realignment in the text.
Yes, let's do that.
We can start by revising the repetitive lyrical refrain. Repeating "and the reason is you" 4 times just really hammers home that external dependency.
It does.
We can shift the phrasing to emphasize a commitment to the process of self-realization while maintaining the existing rhythm and rhyme scheme.
Oh, that's smart. Keep the flow.
Right, so a modification like a reason to see it through or a reason to find the truth changes the psychological posture.
It really does. The speaker is now changing out of a dedication to the truth of their act.
Or for the commitment to the difficult process of accountability itself.
Another area that needs this adjustment is the stanza where the speaker says, "And be the one who catches all your tears."
Yes, definitely.
This phrasing inadvertently sets up a savior dynamic. I mean, wanting to swoop in and comfort the person is a natural impulse, but it becomes highly problematic when the speaker is the source of those tears in the first place.
It really is.
It centers the speaker's need to feel helpful over the injured party's need for space.
And shifting the focus of the apology away from that savior dynamic requires acknowledging the boundary of the other person's pain.
Right.
Instead of attempting to bridge the physical gap to catch the tears, the lyrics could demonstrate the speaker standing firm in their own transformation from a respectful distance.
What would that look like?
Phrasing that reflects this might look like, "I know I cannot dry your tears, but I will face my deepest fears."
Oh, wow. Yeah, that's much stronger.
These are just a few ways to ensure the emotional climax of the lyrics acts as a validation of the psychological maturity established in the prose. The objective is to align both halves of the material so they are operating on the same philosophical logic.
Well, this mismatched foundational logic between the sections doesn't just exist in the abstract.
No, it doesn't.
It actually manifests physically in how the text is built on the page. The abrupt structural shift from clinical, public health advice to intimate, rhythmic confession creates a jarring pacing disconnect for the reader.
It really is jarring.
The text juxtaposes two entirely different methods of processing regret, the analytical brain and the feeling heart. Reading this transition, however, feels like driving a car down the highway at 60 miles an hour.
And suddenly shifting the transmission into reverse.
Exact, total whiplash. The engine pieces are all highly functional, but the mechanical grinding is undeniable.
Right.
When readers encounter clinical text, their brains shift into an analytical processing mode. They are parsing declarative facts, categorizing information, looking for actionable steps. So how do we guide a reader out of that objective headspace and into a subjective, emotional one without causing cognitive friction?
That cognitive friction is the specific weakness we have to address because it severely disrupts reader immersion.
Yeah, it takes you right out of it.
The prose section doesn't just trail off into abstract theory. It ends with a very grounded, literal safety net. It provides the ERAN 1201 crisis hotline for readers, advising people to seek professional help if their feelings of guilt lead to thoughts of self-harm.
Which is incredibly important.
It is, but that breaks the fourth wall in a highly serious, public health-oriented manner. The reader's brain is firmly rooted in objective physical reality.
They are literally looking at a phone number they can dial.
Exactly. Immediately dropping them from a national crisis hotline reference directly into an intimate first-person poetic apology that starts with the line, "I'm not a perfect person," completely lacks a transitional bridge.
It's like walking into a wall.
When a reader sees a stanza of poetry, their brain has to recalibrate to expect metaphor, rhythm, and subjectivity. By smashing these two formats together without a buffer, the text forces the reader to perform that recalibration instantly.
Which is asking a lot.
Usually, readers will stumble over that gap. They might even perceive the sudden arrival of the lyrics as melodramatic solely because their analytical brain hasn't had the time to power down.
To solve this cognitive friction, my initial thought would be to just insert a physical break.
Like what?
Perhaps a blank page, a bold subheader, or a hard chapter divide between the clinical text and the lyric. Does simply creating physical space solve the whiplash?
A blank page creates a void, but it doesn't build a mechanical bridge.
Ah, fair.
Space gives the reader time to disconnect, but it doesn't guide them safely to the other side of the concept. The suggestion here is explicitly structural.
Okay.
Introduce a narrative or thematic framing device that weaves the universal clinical advice smoothly into the individual lived experience of the lyrics.
I like where this is going.
We need a mechanism that explicitly signals to the reader that we are now taking the macro-level psychological theory we just learned and applying it to a micro-level personal reality.
A framing device provides a lot of creative freedom for how the pieces interact. The lyrics no longer have to exist in a vacuum.
Right.
They can become an artifact within the universe of the essay itself.
Exactly. There are a few concrete examples of how an author can construct this bridge.
Lay them on me.
One straightforward approach is to add a brief introductory paragraph before the lyrics that frames them explicitly.
Okay.
The prose could conclude the clinical advice, deliver the hotline information, and then transition with a sentence like, applying this framework in the isolation of a quiet room, however, is where the true struggle begins. Consider the internal monologue of someone attempting to put this into practice in real time.
Oh, that's excellent.
And then the text moves into the lyrics. The lyrics are now contextualized as a journal entry, a hypothetical case study, or a demonstration of the prose. It solves the fourth wall problem immediately.
Completely transforms the poem from a sudden change in the fabric of the universe into a deliberate exhibit demonstrating the clinical theory.
Yes, exactly.
Another approach could involve playing with the typography and layout to force the analytical and emotional voices to interact directly on the page.
Yes, interlacing the formats is a highly effective, slightly more avant-garde solution.
How would that work?
Well, instead of presenting the prose entirely and then the lyrics entirely, the author could intersperse stanzas of the lyrics directly between paragraphs of the prose.
Interesting.
A reader might process a clinical paragraph about how guilt shouldn't become a permanent punishment. Right below that, indented and italicized, sits the stanza, I'm not a perfect person. There's many things I wish I didn't do.
Okay, I can visualize that.
Then, the standard formatting resumes, and the prose discusses the fine line between taking responsibility and continuous self-punishment.
Oh, that's really powerful.
This interlacing method creates a visual and rhythmic demonstration of the internal struggle. The analytical mind tries to establish order, and the emotional memory interrupts it.
It acts as a kind of Greek chorus to the clinical text.
Yes, whether using a framing device or an interlaced format, the goal is to smooth the pacing so the transition feels like a purposeful stylistic choice, rather than an accidental collision of documents.
That interlacing idea creates a literal dialogue between the mind and the heart on the page, dictating the reading speed and the emotional intake simultaneously. So we've built the structural bridge, but we also have to evaluate the narrative content that is actually crossing over that.
Right. The actual content.
The exploration of accountability lacks a demonstration of the hard conversations mentioned in the text, leaving the emotional resolution feeling unearned.
Yeah, that's a key issue.
The prose explicitly tells the reader that fixing mistakes is not a simple process. It mentions that it takes time, courage, and requires hard conversations. It prepares the reader for friction.
It really sets the stage for it.
However, the lyrical section features a one-sided confession where the other party's reaction is entirely absent. My instinct when analyzing this omission is that the author might be trying to create a universal template.
To let the reader project their own situation?
Exactly. By keeping the injured party's reaction blank, perhaps the author allows any reader to project their own specific circumstances onto the apology. It becomes a universally applicable, I'm sorry.
That's a valid thought. Universalizing an experience is a very common technique in lyricism, allowing listeners or readers to step into the shoes of the speaker.
Right.
However, we have to look at how that technique functions within the context of the entire piece. When we analyze the psychology of a true apology, the difference between seeking absolution and taking accountability becomes vital.
Can you unpack that difference?
Sure. Seeking absolution is about the speaker wanting to feel cleansed of their guilt. Taking accountability is about acknowledging the impact on the other person, regardless of whether absolution is granted.
That's a crucial distinction.
The weakness of omitting the friction of the other party's reaction is that it strips the piece of its narrative weight and defaults to seeking absolution.
I see.
The prose warns that the other side won't always forgive, establishing a high-stakes reality. The lyrics then assume the apology is a neat, closed loop simply because the speaker is vocalizing it.
Just by saying the words out loud.
Right. The speaker says, "That's why I need you to hear," framing the climax of accountability as the mere act of transmission. I speak, you hear, I am cleansed, undermines the profound warning established earlier.
It's like writing a complex mathematical equation proving the structural integrity of a bridge, but never actually driving a heavy truck over it to apply a load.
That's exactly what it's like.
We have the theory of accountability, but we don't know if the speaker's resolve will hold under the pressure of reality. I mean, the hardest part of delivering an apology isn't summoning the courage to say the words.
No, it's not.
It's sitting in the deafening silence that follows, waiting to see if the other person accepts them, rejects them, or simply walks away.
Absolutely.
If the text avoids that silence, it avoids the truest, most vulnerable part of the experience. An emotional resolution where the speaker finds a reason to start over new feels unearned because they haven't been tested by the fire of the hard conversation they promised.
The tension of that unknown reaction is the absolute crucible of accountability.
Yeah. The suggestion here is to inject narrative friction into either the lyrical or prose section to explicitly acknowledge that the injured party might reject the apology.
And to show the speaker maintaining their commitment to personal growth anyway.
Exactly. We need to see the speaker's resolve survive contact with a negative or ambiguous reaction. But introducing that friction requires careful handling so it doesn't derail the focus of the piece.
True.
If we introduce a line about the injured party yelling or explicitly rejecting the speaker, does that sudden external conflict pull focus away from the speaker's internal psychological journey?
It doesn't pull focus if the friction is used specifically to highlight the speaker's internal boundary setting.
Let's look at concrete examples of how to inject this friction effectively.
Okay. In the prose section, we can expand on the abstract phrase, when there is no true way to fix it. The author could introduce a specific scenario detailing how one processes a rejected apology.
Like a very brief scene or description?
Just a sentence or two. We could add something like, when you offer a sincere apology and are met with a closed door, the work of taking responsibility does not end. It transforms into the quiet, often painful work of respecting their boundary.
Oh, that's beautiful.
This grounds the clinical theory in a relatable, difficult reality without shifting the narrative focus onto the other person's actions. It keeps the focus on the speaker's response to those actions.
It clearly defines what the phrase hard conversation actually looks like when the conversation goes poorly, showing the reader the exact mechanism of respecting a boundary.
We can apply this exact same principle to the lyrical section to ensure the emotional climax is fully earned.
How would we change the lyrics?
We can alter one of the later stanzas to reflect the silence, distance, or anger of the injured party. Instead of the speaker simply repeating their desire to be heard, we show them holding on to their newfound autonomous meaning, despite the lack of immediate forgiveness.
Could you give an example of the revised stanza?
Sure, a revised stanza might read, I know the words are not enough. I know the road ahead is rough. But even if you turn away, I'll live the truth I found today.
Wow. By removing the conditionality of the change, the speaker demonstrates true accountability.
Right.
It clearly says, I am doing the work to change for the better. I hope you see it, but even if you choose not to, I am still committing to this path.
Exactly.
That vivid demonstration proves the speaker has actually internalized the clinical advice given in the first half of the material. By injecting this narrative friction, the emotional resolution is forged in the reality of human consequence, rather than existing in an idealized vacuum.
Yeah, so to summarize the actionable steps for the author?
Yes, let's recap.
First, revise the lyrical motivations to reflect internal growth by shifting away from total dependency, adjusting phrasing like, the reason is you to a reason to see it through.
Perfect.
Second, ease the jarring pacing transitions by utilizing a framing device to introduce the lyrics as an internal monologue or by interlacing the lyrical stanzas directly between the prose paragraphs.
Right. Build that structural bridge.
And finally, ground the emotional resolution by adding specific lines that acknowledge the injured party's potential rejection, proving the speaker's commitment to growth is independent of external validation.
We invite the author to implement these structural and thematic revisions and submit the updated material back to our critique session. Taking these concepts from abstract theory into grounded narrative reality will truly elevate the impact of the entire piece.